With 114D deep in processing mode, Plagueis withdrew a vial of his own blood and subjected it to analysis. Despite the recent amplification of his powers, he sensed that his midichlorian count had not increased since the events on Baldemnik, and the analysis of the blood sample confirmed his suspicions. Research had long ago established that blood transfusions from force-sensitive individuals did not confer force powers to recipients, though blood with high midichlorian count could grant temporary strength and resiliency. Experiments in absolute transfusion had gone horribly awry for recipients, suggesting to some that the force exacted a toll on those who attempted to tamper with it. An individual's midichlorians seemed to know to whom they belonged, and become unresponsive outside their dedicated vessel. While midichlorians appeared to resist manipulation of a sort that might imperil the balance of the force, they remained passive, even compliant, in the case of a weak-willed being manipulated by one who was strong in the force. Perhaps that explained why it was often easier to call on the force to heal someone other than oneself. Extending life, then, could hinge on something as simple as being able to induce midichlorians to create new cells, to subdivide at will, increasing their numbers into the tens of thousands, to heal or replace damaged, aging, or metastatic cells. Midichlorians had to be compelled to serve the needs of the body, to bestow strength when needed, to overcome physical insult, or prevent cells from reaching senescence. If one accepted the tales handed down in accounts and holocrons, the ancient Sith had known how to accomplish this. But had Sith like Naga Sadow and Exar Kun genuinely been more powerful? Or had they benefited from the fact that the dark side had been more prominent in those bygone eras? Some commentators claimed that the ability to survive death had been limited to those with a talent for sorcery and alchemy, and that the use of such practices actually predated the arrival of the Dark Jedi exiles on Korriban. But sorcery had been employed less to extend life than to create illusions, fashion beasts, and resurrect the dead. Powerful adepts were said to have been able to saturate the atmosphere of planets with dark side energy, compel stars to explode or induce paralysis in crowds, as Exar Kun apparently did to select members of the Republic Senate. Other adepts used sorcery merely as a means to better understand ancient Sith spells and sigils. Darth Bane had referred to sorcery as one of the purest expressions of the dark side of the Force, and yet he hadn't been able to harness those energies with near the skill as had his one-time apprentice, Zana. Bane's disciples, however, believed that he had experimented with a technique of even greater significance, that of essence transfer, which he had learned after acquiring and plundering the holocron of Darth Andedu, and which involved the relocation of an individual's consciousness into another body, or in some cases, a talisman, temple, or sarcophagus. Thus had the most powerful of the ancient Sith Lords survived death to haunt and harass those who would infiltrate their tombs. But none of this amounted to corporeal survival. Plagueis had no interest in being a lingering disembodied presence trapped between worlds and powerless to affect the material realm, except through the actions of weak-minded beings he could goad, coax, or will into action. Nor did he seek to shunt his mind into the body of another, whether an apprentice, as Bane was thought to have attempted, or some vat-grown clone. Nothing less than the immortality of his body and mind would suffice. Everlasting life. Sadly, he could glean only so much from the texts, crystals, and holocrons stored in the library. Crucial knowledge had been lost during the brief mastery of Darth Gravid, and many of the most important elements of Sith training since had been passed from masters to apprentices in sessions that had been left unrecorded. More to the point, Darth Tenebrous had had very little to say regarding death. Alone in one of the test centers, surrounded by his experiments, these things Plagueis could say he loved. The enormity of what had occurred on Baldemnik suddenly rose up before him like a monolith of immeasurable proportions. For the first time, he could feel the force of the dark side not as a mere supporting wind fluffing the sails of a pleasure boat, but as a hurricane eager to loose a storm of destruction on the crumbling Republic and the indolent Jedi Order. A scouring storm that would lay waste to everything antiquated and corrupt, and pave the way for a new order in which the Sith would be returned to their rightful place as the stewards of the galaxy, and before whom all the diverse species would bow, not only in obeisance and fear, but in gratitude for having been drawn back from the brink. The task before him was at once invigorating and daunting, and in the eye of that cycloning storm he could hear the faraway voices of all those who had laid the groundwork of the Sith's imperative, the grand plan, those who had enlivened the hurricane with their breath and lives. Darths Bane and Zannah, and on down through the generations that had included Cognos, Vectivus, Ramage, and Tenebrous. 100 years earlier, Tenebrous' Twi'lek master had opened a small rend in the fabric of the Force, allowing the dark side to be felt by the Jedi Order for the first time in more than 800 years. That had been the inauguration, the commencement of the revenge of the Sith. And now the time had come to enlarge that rend into a gaping hole, a gaping wound, into which the Republic and the Jedi Order would, to their own hazard, be drawn.